Yeah, I don't think Mother knew about this.
Uncle Marvin was strangled by his own beard.
Yep, you never saw it coming.
And welcome, America, to America's family history show, Extreme Genes and ExtremeGenes.com. It is Fisher at this end, your radio root sleuth, on the program where we shake your family tree and watch the nuts fall out. Who do we have for you today? How about the guy who figured out who the woman was in that poster, that World War II thing that says we can do it? Rosie the Riveter? You're going to want to hear from Professor Jim Kimble from Seton Hall University. He took 5 years to research this stuff, and you're going to want to hear the whole process and what led to what. Fascinating story coming up for you in about 10 minutes in 2 parts. Hey, if you haven't signed up for our weekly Genie newsletter yet, it's been a while. Let's get on it here, right? Yeah, you get a blog from me each week. You get links to past and present shows and links to great stories that you'll appreciate as your family historian. And right now it's time to check in with David Allen Lambert in Boston, Massachusetts. He, by the way, is the chief genealogist of the New England Historic Genealogical Society and AmericanAncestors.org. Dave, how has your week been going?
Well, I love a week where I have a few days off and I can actually play genealogist at home.
Nice.
And thank you, Ancestry.com, because a shaky leaf has given me a new clue to when my family emigrated from England. I always knew that my grandfather came over with his mother and his sister after their father did, and that he had arrived sometime previous, but I didn't know a whole heck of a lot what he did for work. Well, I do now. I knew a story from my great aunt that he had worked for the railroad, but I now know that he was hired in 1896, how much he made for pay every week, and I also know a very exciting date, the date that he resigned his work because he was leaving for Canada.
How cool
So
is
this
that?
is a database on Ancestry that covers a good span of years, Fish. It's called the UK Railway Employment Records from 1833 to 1956, and you can find it on Ancestry.com.
How cool is that? That sounds like a great new database.
What have you found this week?
You know, those little shaky leaves, Dave, they they reveal all kinds of stuff. And, I got to admit that for the most part now, I've worked so much on this over the years that when I see a shaky leaf, it doesn't usually reveal something new to me that I haven't seen before.
I can relate.
This past week, I found one. It was a church record. My uncle getting married to my aunt. My dad's brother marrying my aunt back in 1927. And it was the church book record. There it was. I thought, okay, I will link that to my uncle's page on Ancestry. And when I did that, of course, it took the index date and information and compared it to what I have on my page. And the dates were different. And I thought, did I get it wrong on his marriage date? How would I have done that? And so I went back. New Jersey, of course, is infamous for how bad they are about sharing their public records. And the way I actually had my aunt and uncle's marriage date is from the newspaper stories about them and from their daughter, my cousin. So I knew they got married June 23rd, 1928 in their hometown of Pagoda, New Jersey in Bergen County. But this new record showed they actually got married 10 months before that in Navesink in Monmouth County, New Jersey, near the Jersey Shore. So they were secretly married for 10 months before they got married. And so we can kind of put 2 and 2 together with that. So my cousin was in shock, but it was quite fun. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, social media is one way genealogists communicate, and there's a new show in town. Well, not really that new, but it's called Mastodon. And a lot of genealogists are going over, and they're becoming #Geneadons. And this platform is similar to Twitter, and it's just another way for people to stay connected and reach out across the world. It's available in over 93 languages. Well, I love a website where you can find a catalog to what's at your local library. But how about a catalog that goes to every library around the world, practically. Well, maybe not all of them, but it's called worldcat.org. And their newest release, Fish, has an emphasis on genealogical resources. And it always has been good in the past. It's great for looking at books, original manuscripts like somebody's diary, or maybe you're looking for the diary kept by the minister who married your aunt and uncle back in 1927. They may know where it is.
Interesting.
So you just go to worldcat.org. It's free, and it indexes many libraries, including where I work in Boston. Well, on 23andMe, when we can find out how much more Neanderthal you are than me, or vice versa.
Right.
Well, the next time you go into the kitchen, you may be applying some of that technology from way back then to your modern meal. They're saying now that Neanderthals use the same cooking techniques as humans. In fact, they apparently had gone so far as to make the food edible and to detoxify essential different plants and things. So you remember Aunt Mary when she used to make those parsnips that you didn't want to eat? She may have been reaching back thousands of years to prepare it so you would find it edible.
Amazing. Who knew? I mean, I always thought, the Neanderthal thing, and I have apparently a lot of Neanderthal in me, that they were a little behind the humans, but it looks like they brought something to the gene pool, so that's good.
Mm-hmm. We always look back at the greatest generation, and many of them were actually children or born around the time of the Great Depression. 1929 to 39 seems to be the range, but they're now looking at DNA, Fish, to find that certain cells from people born and conceived during that time frame are actually having an accelerated form of aging. Now, most of these people are in their 90s and 80s now anyways, but just in general, and they're saying that at that point in time, due to stresses for people that are out of work, as 25% of the U.S. workforce is unemployed, that this is something that is now noticeable in DNA.
Fascinating.
That's all I have from Beantown and around the world for us right now. I'll check with you in a little bit for Ask Us Anything. But remember, if you're not a member of American Ancestors, the holiday season is approaching. You can save $20 on a membership on AmericanAncestors.org with the coupon code EXTREME.
All right, David. Thank you so much. See you at the back end of the show. And coming up next, I'm going to talk with Professor James Kimble. He's with Seton Hall University, and he spent 5 years researching one poster from World War II. It's that "We Can Do It" poster with the woman holding up her fist. Who was she? Well, he figured it out. He'll tell you how and who it is, coming up in 2 parts when we return in 3 minutes on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show.
It's the time of year that we gather family close, and our friends at Legacy Tree Genealogists are celebrating this together time by offering, for a very limited time, $200 off the price of any genealogy research project for new clients. That's research by some of the field's top experts. It's the perfect time to order that unique and personalized family history gift at a great price, but you must hurry. This offer ends on Friday, December 23rd. Just go to legacytree.com and use the promo code GIFT200. That's one word, GIFT200. Legacy Tree Genealogist has been around for over 18 years and has experts covering every state and virtually every country in the world. If you've been wanting to discover your family story, take advantage of this remarkable holiday discount, $200 off the price of any genealogy research project for new clients. Once again, use the promo code GIFT200 at legacytree.com. Offer ends December 23rd.
Legacy Tree Genealogist, helping you discover your past, one ancestral story after another. Genies, our friends at BYU TV have a new series out created just for us, family historians. It's called How I Got Here. It's a fast-paced travel show where young adults accompany their immigrant parents back to where they came from, their countries of origin. These are 10-day trips of a lifetime where these parent-child duos relive the sacrifice, struggle, and circumstances that led their families to leave to where they are now. There's a new episode every week with visited countries including Italy, Serbia, Mexico, Chile, Israel, Slovakia, and Ghana. BYU TV is on Roku and Fire Stick, online at byutv.org, or through the BYU TV app. How I Got Here is available now with a new episode every week. Feel the impact this journey has on those who grew up not knowing. And just a warning, keep a box of Kleenex nearby. you're going to need it.
Genies, if you haven't done so yet, you've got to check out Ancestry.com's new Storytelling Creation Center, Ancestry Stories. Their story builder allows you to create a story with 6 different slide types, including a title page, a photo display page, including stock pictures they provide, and documents. And you can write a summary. And with those photos, you can add motion, panning left to right or right to left. For now, these stories can only be created on your iPhone, but Android is still to come and can be saved to your ancestors' pages on your trees. You can then access via phone, and in time, it'll appear on your desktop. You can also share it with family members and friends, whether or not they subscribe to Ancestry.com. For the younger generation that wants stories in a quick and easy-to-consume form, you can't beat this. I've already shared a story with my family, and the reactions are remarkable. Try out these incredible new tools and share your new story creations on social media using hashtag #MyAncestryStory.
Well, as you know, when we get going on our research, sometimes we can end up down the rabbit hole and find interesting things we never imagined when we're researching our family or researching history. And I recently made that discovery of some work of a man I'm talking to now as my next guest, Professor Jim Kimble, a communication professor at Seton University, who worked on researching who was it behind that Rosie the Riveter poster that says, "We can do it." And it took a lot of years, but Professor, it looks like you made some great progress on this and finally came to the correct conclusion.
It was quite a treasure hunt for a number of years, but I was pretty happy with the results of this research.
So what was your interest in Rosie the Riveter? Was there a World War II connection within your own family?
A little bit in my own family, but more involving my own research. When all of this started, that part where you jump into the rabbit hole,
yeah.
I was working on my dissertation at the University of Maryland, which was about World War II. So it's a history-oriented look at how the U.S. Treasury Department used the strategies of propaganda to persuade Americans to buy war bonds. And it so happened in the course of discussing the implications of that book, I mentioned the We Can Do It poster, except I referred to it as Rosie the Riveter. And in the course of editing the project, I came across a book called Design for Victory, which was done by 2 curators at the Smithsonian Institution, Harry Rubenstein, and the other one with the unlikely name Larry Bird, or William L. Bird. He prefers Larry. And they had access to, by virtue of their position, to thousands of wartime posters, including, and they've reprinted in this book, 6 or 7 posters by a guy named J. Howard Miller.
Okay.
One of them was the We Can Do It poster, and it absolutely threw me for a loop because I hadn't ever thought that there would be more than one. So it turns out they were produced by Westinghouse. I had to correct the reference to Rosie the Riveter because Westinghouse didn't have riveters. They wouldn't have called it that. And so that was the leap into the rabbit hole. I started working with a colleague at the University of Pittsburgh. That's where Westinghouse was located during the war, so the connection was good. And Lester Olson and I worked very hard to come up with all the information we could gain about that poster. And what we discovered was that almost everything our culture thinks we know about that poster is based on a myth.
And what is that myth?
So there's actually a couple of them. Probably the most common myth is that that poster was famous during the war.
Okay.
We assume that because it's famous now, so we project ourselves back in time.
Sure.
But if you look closely at the poster, on the bottom, it says post February 15 to February 28, or it gives you a 2-week window. And it's clear from Bird and Rubenstein's book that this was a succession of posters. Of course, paper was rationed during the war, so they would have recycled all of those posters after they took them down.
Okay.
It simply didn't have a chance to become famous because it was in Westinghouse for 2 weeks.
You mean within the business?
Yeah, within the Westinghouse factories.
Okay.
So Westinghouse, like most large corporations, was involved in war work in the 1940s.
Sure.
And so they made helmet liners, lots of electrical products for the military. And so they hired this freelance artist in the Pittsburgh area, J. Howard Miller, and they said, we want you to do some motivational posters for our workforce. And so that poster really wouldn't have been known during the war, not until it was recovered by the National Archives and then the Smithsonian, with the only two remaining copies that we know of, did it start to become popular in the 1980s. But when Lester and I were doing this research, nobody knew that.
Interesting. And this is from what year?
So the Westinghouse poster was in those factories in February 1943.
43.
Just for those 2 weeks.
2 weeks, 14 days, just among the factory workers. And then what's the other myth behind this?
So we also question whether or not the poster would have been seen as feminist.
Okay.
Of course, that's a common interpretation today. Rosie the Riveter, this empowering image, we women on the home front, can do it. That depends on an interpretation that it was everywhere, that it was recruiting women to the factories, which of course is wrong. But we also found some imagery within the Westinghouse in-house magazine that showed people raising their fists up just like her at in-house rallies. What we concluded was this upraised fist had a special meaning for Westinghouse workers. And in fact, the picture that we found was of a male labor leader, not a woman. So it was a community-building gesture within Westinghouse, not this feminist, we can do it, we are powerful, hear us roar, we women.
Fascinating. That's amazing. I've never heard that before. So now you have this actual history behind it, and you have several other posters that compete with the We Can Do It poster. Where did it go from there?
So Lester and I published that work in 2006, and while we were in the publication phase, getting close to publication, we kept coming across this name of a woman who was said, and it was pretty widely accepted, that she was the model.
Okay.
For that poster. Now, that wasn't part of our research, but she passed away not too long after that, and her obituary went across the world. You can still find them online. Her name was Geraldine Hoff Doyle. She lived in Michigan, and when she passed away, these obituaries said, the face of Rosie the Riveter has died, the face that you know from the We Can Do It poster. Having already questioned just about everything else about that poster, I started asking myself, how do we know it's really her? And so that got me deeper into the rabbit hole.
Yeah. So where did you begin? You obviously wanted to find out why it was thought that she was Rosie, and how did you disprove it and then move on to the correct answer?
So there were some fundamental questions that I had to ask at the start, and you're on to the first one, which is, what is her story? Why does she think? Right. Because all that you really found in the obituaries was other people saying that she was that person. So this basically required some detective work, go back and see who cited whom. And it all goes back to an experience that she had in the 1980s at some point, when she came across a photograph in a Modern Maturity magazine. Modern Maturity was doing a retrospective on women during the war, those Rosies, a tribute to them, and so on. And in this photo montage, it had a picture of a woman in a bandana working at a lathe. And she looked at this photograph and she recognized herself. Kind of an amazing moment. And she showed her friends, and she brought out pictures of herself from the 1940s that looked a lot like this woman in Modern Maturity, the photograph.
Sure.
And so they all concluded this is her. It was kind of a brief moment of minor fame among her and her family and so on. Fast forward another 10 years, Smithsonian Magazine places the We Can Do It poster on its cover. And she sees that too. And she holds that cover up to the Modern Maturity photograph that she believes is her, and she sees more similarities. And so she says to friends and family, this is me in the photograph, and look how much this poster on the magazine looks like that photograph.
Yeah.
I think me too. And that's how the story got started. The local media in Michigan picked that up, and at first it was sort of qualified. She thinks, she may be. But as it got repeated, the doubt was left out, and eventually it became an accepted fact over a number of years. And she, of course, believed this. She would go to parades dressed as the We Can Do It poster, holding up a big copy of it. She was invited to address the Michigan Senate. She was in the Women's Hall of Fame. Little kids would write to her and ask for her autograph as Rosie the Riveter.
Wow, she had really quite a story. It's kind of nice that she passed away before the truth was revealed, right?
In fact, that was something that my wife had said at one point. She'd said, if she were still alive, you probably would have wanted to hold off on this because that would be, the news that she wasn't actually would have been pretty hard.
Yeah, really quite devastating. And I would imagine for her family and those who were close to her who kind of reveled in all of the attention.
Indeed, and in fact, there was what was one of the harder tasks of this project was once the initial publication came out of the second article that I did, I wrote a letter to her daughter and broke the news. So we had a good exchange.
Did you?
She accepted.
She took it okay?
Yeah, I think so. It wasn't easy for her, but it's the historical truth.
Were there any other people who claimed to be Rosie the Riveter?
You do see occasional folks with a tie to that name. Many of them were named Rosalind or Rosalind, and a few of them even were riveters. But no one else that I know of claimed to be the model in that poster.
Okay, so this was probably it. She was the one. So now that you found the one who wasn't Rosie the Riveter, the challenge would be to find the one who was, and that sounds a lot more difficult to me.
That was, in fact, yes, the hardest part. Once I had begun to question Doyle's story, the woman from Michigan, I started to focus on that photograph that had been in Modern Maturity magazine. And I started to ask myself, I'm a historian of propaganda, so I have some of these research skills. How can I figure out who's really in that poster? And if, in fact, it's Doyle, then I'm willing to affirm her story. But if it's not, we need to know.
All right, Jim, we got to take a pause here for a moment because we're up to break time, and we will continue with Professor Jim Kimble from Seton Hall University talking about his discovery of the identity of the real Rosie the Riveter when we return in 5 minutes on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show. All right, we're back. It's Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show, and ExtremeGenes.com. Fisher here, your radio root sleuth, talking to Professor Jim Kimble from Seton Hall University. He is the man who discovered the true identity of the woman in the We Can Do It Rosie the Riveter poster from World War II. And Jim, we were just talking about how you disproved the woman who claimed it was her all those many years ago. And now let's talk about the discovery of the actual Rosie the Riveter on the We Can Do It poster that we all assumed was out during the war, but was only inside a factory for a couple of weeks.
You bet. Well, the principal moment here, the principal artifact, was this photograph that had appeared in Modern Maturity magazine. So in trying to find out who that woman really was, if it wasn't Geraldine Hoff Doyle from Michigan, I thought what I should do is look at war-era 1940s publications, reasoning that it was published at some point.
Sure.
So this was a years-long process, literally years, where I would go to a research library that hadn't retired its older printed volumes of old magazines, and I would take down from the shelf 5 or 6 volumes of, say, Collier's magazine or Time or, you name it. There were hundreds and hundreds of magazines at that time. And I would just take them to a study carrel and spend a couple of hours going page by page, looking for this photograph. It's the most elusive needle in a haystack search you can imagine. And this wasn't a full-time occupation, of course. I had other research to do and teaching to do. But whenever I had some free time, I would start leafing through these things. I even bought publications from eBay sellers and was able to not go to a library, but do it in my office and at home and so on. And so one day, I was sitting in my office on campus, and I was leafing through page by page, was my method, a copy of the New York Times Insert, the publication, the weekly magazine that's every Sunday. And so I had some bound volumes of that. And I was listening to voicemail messages, kind of half paying attention to what I was doing. And then this photo appeared right there in the New York Times magazine.
Wow. What year?
That was in the summer of 1942, June 1942. Okay. And I thought, aha, here she is. And so I looked for a caption thinking, here's the big moment. They're going to give me her name. And it was just a woman working in a factory.
No.
It did give me a location, though. It said Alameda Naval Air Station.
Okay, California.
California. Now, that's not Michigan, so this is probably not Doyle. It could have been a mistake. You never know for sure. The captions come later. So that was a frustrating mini lead. So fast forward a little bit more. I was looking through Time magazine, and I came across a photo montage of women working during the war. And one of these photographs caught my attention. It wasn't the woman at the lathe, at least not that picture, the famous one, but it looked kind of similar. And I realized it might actually be the same woman in a different pose. Same bandana, different machine. So I spent a week with my colleagues. I printed it out, enlarged it from the little tiny Time magazine version, and I went from colleague to colleague. Is this the same woman? Is this the same woman? So you can see this is becoming an obsession.
And how did the vote go?
They agreed it was the same woman. So how this finally resolved itself was I had been doing reverse image searches via Google all this time on the modern maturity photograph. Now I had a new one to do a reverse image search. And so I did that. It came up. It turned out there's a business out of Memphis. Its business model is they buy the photo morgues of newspapers that have gone out of business, and they sell them on eBay one by one. They had that second photograph, and when I pursued it with them, and I said, do you have one that's similar, might have came on at the same time? They said, yes, we do. And they sent them both to me after I purchased them.
And how much were they, by the way?
They were, as I recall, about $15 each.
$15. And this is an eBay thing, right?
Yes. The business was called Historic Images, and they'd still do the same thing.
Yeah. And so we talk about this all the time for researching your family history. There is so much stuff on eBay relating to that. And look at how you're using it as well.
Mm-hmm. And it was just happenstance. The second image happened to be the one that they had uploaded.
Sure.
Elated and, of course, waited by the mailbox for a couple of days, anxious to get these photos. When they came in, these are the original printings of the photograph from some newspaper somewhere. On the back, they both had a caption tag glued on there that gave me the information I needed. So it was from Alameda, and the first line told me all I needed to know. It says, and I'm looking at it now, pretty Naomi Parker looks like she might catch her nose in the turret lathe she's operating.
Wow. Wow. And this is how many years since you began down this rabbit hole?
5 years.
5 years. And you got the name. And then you found out she was still living.
And then I found out she was still living. I didn't know that immediately. I ended up hiring a genealogical society out of California to track down this woman. They sent me some tantalizing hints, but eventually they sent me a formal letter that said, Jim, we have a rule that we can't do research on people who are alive. We have evidence indicating that Naomi Parker is alive.
Wow.
And based on that, I was able to find a phone number for her and cold called her to ask about her experiences.
And did she know that she was Rosie the Riveter on the We Can Do It poster?
She did. Although that took place in the second phone call, and the first phone call, she hung up on me.
But she was aware of it herself, that she was the person.
She was.
What did her family think when she told them that?
Well, she had known for a couple of years that there was this photograph of her going around, Keep in mind, she's by this point in her early 90s, but she's aware of this photograph. And she'd even contacted the Rosie the Riveter folks. There's a national park named Rosie the Riveter near Alameda, north of San Francisco in Richmond, trying to correct the record and say, this woman isn't named Doyle, this woman is me. And she even had a newspaper clipping from the 1940s where a newspaper had published it with her name. But nobody accepted her story because why would you?
Yeah.
It's a fact that it's Doyle. So when I talked to her, and she lived with her sister at that time, both in their 90s, she was excited that somebody was finally willing to listen to her story.
Isn't that amazing? And so obviously you got the word out with your publication and your research. What was the response to that?
So the article came out, and it made a reasonably big splash. It captured the attention, though, of People magazine. And I guess I never thought before what an impact People magazine could have.
Yeah.
But they loved the story. They sent a crew to her house, which is north of Sacramento, a couple of hours, so it's really rural up there. They sent a makeup artist, a lighting technician, a photographer, a whole crew, and they took all these glamour shots of her dressed as the We Can Do It poster.
Unbelievable. Wow, what a life-changing thing for her. She must have loved that.
She did love it. I think she liked the attention, but really, and she's on record as saying this, what she really wanted wasn't fame or anything like that. She simply wanted her identity back because for her it was hurtful that somebody else's name was attached to her photograph.
Sure.
And whether or not that meant she was actually the real model for the poster, we may never know. The artist didn't leave much in the way of records, but at least she got her identity back for the last few years of her life.
What a story. And what an adventure for you, Jim, in your free time going about all this research.
It was quite a maze, a labyrinth, but I enjoyed the successful conclusion to it.
He's Professor Jim Kimble from Seton Hall University, teaching communication there. And Jim, thanks so much for coming on and telling the story. I think there are a lot of things to learn from where you went and how you went about it, and your patience, too, over many years before finally attaining your goal. Great stuff.
I appreciate it.
And coming up next, David returns for another round of Ask Us Anything on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show. Genies, our friends at BYU TV have a new series out created just for us, family historians. It's called How I Got Here. It's a fast-paced travel show where young adults accompany their immigrant parents back to where they came from, their countries of origin. These are 10-day trips of a lifetime where these parent-child duos relive the sacrifice, struggle, and circumstances that led their families to leave to where they are now. There's a new episode every week with visited countries including Italy, Serbia, Mexico, Chile, Israel, Slovakia, and Ghana. BYU TV is on Roku and Fire Stick, online at byutv.org, or through the BYU TV app. How I Got Here is available now with a new episode every week. Feel the impact this journey has on those who grew up not knowing. And just a warning, keep a box of Kleenex nearby. You're going to need it. Hey, Genies. As we've dug into our family history explorations over the past year, our community at Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies has taken off. This is where you can meet like-minded genealogists who can help you break through those brick walls and find a whole city behind it, occupied by ancestors whose names you don't even know yet. This is where you can learn from your fellow Genies and ask questions, because many in our community have already been into some of the records you're looking for. Genealogy and Breakthrough Strategies is free. What a great place for brainstorming and getting to know other people who totally get your passion for family history research. If you're looking to take the next step in sharpening your skills, here's a great chance to learn from others and give back in areas you've already become expert in. So join us. That page again is Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. It's a long name, but we cover a lot of territory. Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies.
It's the time of year that we gather family close, and our friends at Legacy Tree Genealogists are celebrating this together time by offering, for a very limited time, $200 off the price of any genealogy research project for new clients. That's research by some of the field's top experts. It's the perfect time to order that unique and personalized family history gift at a great price, but you must hurry. This offer ends on Friday, December 23rd. Just go to legacytree.com and use the promo code GIFT200. That's one word, GIFT200. Legacy Tree Genealogist has been around for over 18 years and has experts covering every state and virtually every country in the world. If you've been wanting to discover your family story, take advantage of this remarkable holiday discount, $200 off the price of any genealogy research project for new clients. Once again, use the promo code GIFT200 at legacytree.com. Offer ends December 23rd.
Legacy Tree Genealogist, helping you discover your past, one ancestral story after another. All right, it's time once again for Ask Us Anything on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show, and extremegenes.com, where we answer your questions. And David Allen Lambert is back from Boston and the New England Historic Genealogical Society. David, this one is from Ricky in Salt Lake City, and she asks, guys, how can I date a photo without a name on it? I have several 19th century photos that must be from the family. Some have stamps. Most have names of photographers. Any suggestions?
Ooh, I love that because I collect antique photography. I may be able to answer this for you fairly easily. First off, the stamps are on the back. These aren't postage stamps.
Right.
These are revenue stamps.
Yes.
They were issued during the time of the Civil War. And for a limited time in the Civil War, about 1862 to 64, you start seeing these on photographs.
Yep.
And so you can date the picture from that. You can also date a picture from a certain photo style. And there's plenty of great articles and things by the photo detective, our friend Maureen Taylor, that can help you date the image with clothing styles and whatnot. So that can help you without a name. The other thing on the back, which is actually a name and a place, it's a photographer. Think about it. You have a photographer, you have their address, and you have their city or town where they're operating out of. Look at a city directory. It's going to give you a date. So now you know that this photographer was operating in, say, Buffalo, New York, between 1871 and 1874. Well, first off, start looking at your family tree on Ancestry or Family Search, or wherever you have it, and start to narrow down where people are listed as residing. So if you found them in a census of 1870 or 1880, somewhere in the county that's near Buffalo, maybe they went to the inner city because you didn't have to live where the photographer was, and sometimes you had to go to them. So that's a good clue. I mean, I'm sure with many of your old family photographs, you probably have a good idea who it is, but maybe not all the names on the back like I do with mine.
Yeah, sure. Well, just a couple of years ago, I was able to solve this picture of my great-great-grandparents, Fisher, from New York City, very much the way you describe it. I actually used the revenue stamp on the back and found that it was only in use, that particular one, for certain years, and it narrowed it down to about a 3 or 4 year period. And then we had the address of the photographer, and it overlapped the date of the stamp by like a year. And so that told me pretty much exactly when my great-great-grandfather's picture was taken. And even though his wife's picture was taken apparently around the same time period at a different photographer, it was apparent that it was pretty much at the same period. So she must have liked his and then went out and got her own done.
Well, you know, it's funny. Revenue stamps were used right up till about 55 years ago. They stopped using them on New Year's Eve, 1967. But if you go 100 years approximately before the first issuing of American revenue stamps, we had a little thing called the Stamp Act.
Yes.
That was a revenue stamp, Fish, that caused the American Revolution.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
It's amazing how history kind of goes back and forth on how it remembers and forgets things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you think about the fact that King George issued this thing and he was now a tyrant, but when our own government did it, it was a whole different thing. But it didn't last that long, and I'm sure it had everything to do with paying for the war at that point. And it was just absolutely necessary to get done. But they're really great on those old pictures, especially if they're from that time period. I think they actually ended, Dave, somewhere in the early 1870s.
Yeah, most of the stamps itself, I mean, were in use for a lot of things like deeds and playing cards.
Yeah.
I've also seen pictures that weren't with revenue stamps that are dated from the same time. So it's a hit or miss. But occasionally you get the initial of the photographer on there. So if you know the picture was taken probably in Boston, you look at the directory, now you can find out who the photographer is by his initials on the back of the picture.
Good hint. I like that a lot. So great question. Really interesting one too, Ricky. So good luck with that. And we do have another listener question coming up next when we return with Ask Us Anything on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show. All right, here we go. Back with Ask Us Anything on Extreme Genes. And our next question is coming from Drew Ohlmeyer in San Francisco. And Drew writes, Scott and Dave, you've talked many times about archives. How much material is actually there that isn't already online? And what could I typically find there? This is a good question, Dave. And the reality is if you really think about how much stuff is online and all the biggest sites in the world, we're still probably barely putting a dent into the stuff that's available in archives everywhere, right?
That's very true. Even with American Ancestors, we have our digital library, and we have this great collection of things we're putting online, but it's only scratching the surface.
Yeah. Do you have stuff at American Ancestors in Boston that haven't begun to be indexed yet?
Oh, sure. Yeah, there's plenty of things. We're dependent on our volunteers and also, finding a database that may interest people. Like when we did the Catholic Archdiocese records, we had the images, but they weren't indexed. It took a real big community of volunteers to index those, and now they're all indexed online. It's great.
Well, and now you're the oldest genealogical society in America. For sure.
Actually, probably in the world.
Really?
Because, Europe didn't really have genealogical societies. You didn't need to find out where you came from if you were still there.
That's probably true. But there are so many archives throughout the country and libraries and other places, but they're all done by different outfits. And I like what you said about the number of people involved, but there's also questions of budgets, what it takes to index things. I know, for instance, I deal a lot with the Crawfordsville Public Library in Montgomery County, Indiana, because that's where my wife's family was from on her mother's side. And they are constantly adding things and digitizing things. They keep up social media there. And so local residents who are interested will dig out material from their own archives in the attic and put things up there that you've never seen before. Like we recently found a photo of my wife's second great grandparents surrounded by their 9 kids. And we've never seen that picture before ever. But somebody said, hey, we got to get this out there for others to find. And we were the beneficiary of that. So if you can go to a library and see what they have not yet digitized, there can be a ton of things.
Well, just think of the collections that Family Search have had. Millions of hands have had a chance to help index.
Yeah.
Even if you've done a couple of pages or you've done 20,000 pages. It helps the common good of genealogy to spend a little time in giving back. I think it's a good genealogical karma.
There's no question about that. There are so many places you can go. The states have archives, and they can't get the legislature, for instance, to provide a budget to go digitize or take photographs of items that may relate to more prominent ancestors or documents that relate to your people. So you go there. You go to the Historical Society for your state or for your county. There are so many places to go. I wouldn't even venture a guess as to what the percentage is that's actually digitized and online, Dave, but could you even think it's as much as 10%, 20%?
I think 20% is a high estimate.
Yes, I do too.
I think that just goes to show you that when you rest upon the laurels that all genealogical material is online, you're really missing out on a lot.
Yeah, don't be lazy. Go out and find the stuff, see what's in the areas of the places you're trying to research, and you're going to get a lot more than you can find online. And then you go back to what's online once you've discovered something there that can, take you right back into other things. So great question. Get on it, and good luck with that. Thanks for it, Drew. And Dave, thanks so much for coming on again. We'll talk to you again next week.
Look forward to it.
All right, my friend. And that's our show for this week. Thanks once again to Professor Jim Kimble from Seton Hall University in New Jersey, Oh, he worked 5 years to figure out who that person was in the "We Can Do It" poster from World War II. If you missed any of it, catch the podcast in all the usual places. TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, ExtremeGenes.com, Spotify, you name it. We will talk to you again next week. Thanks for listening. And remember, as far as everyone knows, we're a nice, normal family.